Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. We are now global, but apparently a lot of the folks here right now are in the Bay Area and I guess Peninsula and East Bay represented, well represented. We are joined today by Kim Moutsos, VP of Editorial at Content Marketing Institute, otherwise known as CMI. We're going to talk about a couple of research reports. There's one that we plan to talk about, the 2025 Career Outlook. And CMI has been very busy. In addition to a great event they have planned this month, they just came out with another research report this week. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I think Kim will briefly cover it. Kim, welcome. And first, tell us a little bit about what is Content Marketing World, and maybe you have a possible discount code for our members.
I do. Thank you for teeing that up, Dennis. Content Marketing World, if you don't already know, is the biggest gathering of content and marketing professionals in the United States, possibly anywhere. The Content Marketing Institute puts it on every year. This year it happens to be in lovely San Diego, as you might have gathered if you joined us earlier to hear our chit chat. And it's coming up on October 21st to 23rd. And the reason I wanted Dennis to ask me about it is that I get to give you my special code for $200 off the registration if you haven't registered and want to go. So if you decide this week that you want to pop down to San Diego or across to San Diego, depending on where you are, and you want to register, please use my code KIMCMI. KIMCMI when you register, and you will save $200. So yeah, thanks. And I'm, super excited to meet people in person there. I'm very excited about the agenda this year. For me, our celebrity speaker is very exciting. It's Issa Rae, who some people might know as President Barbie from the movie, but what you might not know, or maybe you do, is she's just a tremendous content creator and content leader. She's established studios, media businesses. She's a brand ambassador. She obviously got, I don't know if it's obvious, but she got her start writing and creating a web series, and then eventually the HBO show Insecure. So I think she's going to have so much interesting things to say, not just about content creation, but the business of content. And she's also being interviewed by another kind of hero of mine, Aisha Harris, who hosts the podcast Pop Culture Happy Hour. She's one of the co-hosts. So I'm just really excited to see the conversation between them. And there are so many other sessions that, I think are valuable and exciting that we can talk about. So yeah, thanks and Dennis will be there speaking, and many of the people who I already see in the audience will also be there. So it's going to be a good show this year.
And if you're so inclined to buy a ticket, definitely use Kim's code, because it's worth more off than other codes that are floating around there. So Kim's code is special. I think it's...
Yes, exactly. That's why I was excited to share it with you. Yeah. If you're a subscriber to our daily newsletter, you also get that code from me, Friends of Kim. If you read my daily note, you get that code. And then if you are here listening to me chat with you or chatting with me, you also get to use the code. So please do if you'd like to come.
Excellent. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about this research, which came out, I believe, a few weeks ago. I have some questions for Kim. And of course, we would love you to ask questions for anything that comes to mind about this report as we speak about it. And then once we're done covering this report, I think Kim's going to talk about the report that came out this week. And then we're just going to open the floor up to ask Kim anything about content marketing. So this is the report. This is the cover page, 2025 Career Outlook. There's a little introduction. It's 22 pages long. This is available on the contentmarketinginstitute.com site. Let me just flip through the main sections quickly. So there's a lot of data points. There are a lot of interesting, for content marketers or marketers, there's a lot of insights about how they're thinking about their career, how they're thinking about salary, and how they're thinking about AI, some of which may or may not surprise you, the findings. Marketers are satisfied at work. So that's the report. I'm going to go to, let me stop the share and bring up some slides. So Kim, let me first ask you a broad question about research in general. So we've had some talks at this group about using original research as a content marketing vehicle. So the question is, how does CMI plan for a report like this? And how does it plan, conceive, execute, and promote research like the one we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think original research has been, and I think will continue to be, a way for organizations to differentiate themselves and get some attention. AI can't do your original research for you. So this is certainly something I think that can only come from you. Thanks for putting up those slides. We'll get to the skills in a minute, but if you want to put that other if you just want to screen share the report again, maybe just have it
Oh,
there.
sure.
And as I talk about how we planned it, some of it might, you know, can just, if you feel like showing something, feel free to show that.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and in fact, original research is one of the ways that the Content Marketing Institute established its credibility in the beginning, 15 or however many years ago when it was established. We started doing a report called Benchmarks, Budgets, and Trends. And that's the big research. The B2B version just came out yesterday. And we still do that research 15 years later. It helped us so much to establish citations in media, backlinks to our website, discussions among industry people. So it's a great way to um, link your organization to what people are to issues, to whatever. Obviously content marketing was the thing at the time that we wanted to be most associated with, and original research can do that. Many other organizations do this as well. I'm sure you've all seen original research from LinkedIn, Salesforce, Monster, and small organizations do it too. So if you want some examples, I can certainly send you some. But you asked me specifically about this career report and how it came about, how we
Right.
sort of put this one together. And we did approach it a little bit differently because it was a new report for us. And we decided to gate the main report, which we haven't done on our main research. So let me kind of walk you through how we got here. We all felt that in addition to the research that we do every year, we wanted to find something to do research about that wasn't already widely covered, that our audience would be curious and find helpful to know the answers, and that could give us some fresh talking points for, earned media. So we got together as a team. It was kind of a tiger team of editorial, marketing, sales, executive leadership, which is Stephanie Stahl, our leader, and Robert Rose, chief strategy advisor. And we brainstormed, what are some things that people need to know where research isn't readily available? Is that something that we could tell stories about? Is it something that's relevant, that we have insight into? So that's kind of how we landed on this sort of career and salary research. 3 years ago, when we did the first version of this, there really wasn't any career or salary research looking at the function of content within marketing or within communications. So we started by identifying that gap. And then we worked together with that same team, editorial, strategy, marketing, social, and PR, to think about what kinds of stories we could tell based on the findings. And we did that before we even developed the questionnaire, because we wanted to have that in mind so we could ask the right questions to get us to those stories. We're very fortunate to have a research director on staff. For this one, we also brought in an outside researcher to help us with crafting the questionnaire and analyzing the results. So once we got to that point, then we field the survey. After we get the data back, we meet again as a team to look at the findings. Did it align with what we expected? How will we shape the report? What details do we want to include in our pitches to media, to people like you, Dennis, who are, industry observers and experts and facilitators like of this meeting? What do we want to include in the article? What portions do we want to keep behind a gate? And then we came up with a promotion plan, which of course includes all of our owned channels, our email, our website, our live stream that we do with Amanda Subler and JK, if any of you watch that, our social media channels, which, as you know, is a constantly changing place to experiment and try new things. And then we execute the plan, right? We do the publishing, we get the promotions going, and some of those promotions are basically how I landed here talking about this research with you today. So that's the broad outline of how we put together this research. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about, research in general or this report in general.
We do have a question, Kim, from Kevin in the chat. He says, original research requires resources and hence costs. Is there an original research line item in the marketing budget? And if so, how do you set the number?
Ooh, that is a really great question. And I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question, but I will say some of our reports are sponsored. So we factor in, because historically we've been doing this, we have some forecasts and some guesses about, which reports we'll be able to get a sponsor for, what kind of revenue we expect from that. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think because historically we've always done research, those numbers are kind of built into our plan for the year. So yeah, I can get back to you with some more details about that, but that's kind of the broad shape of it.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Allie. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Allie. You had your hand up.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, if it's of any help, I answered just from my experience in the chat there. We did have a line item in the budget for this. The first year, and my last role, it was actually spearhead by Demand Gen because they wanted to use it as an opportunity to generate leads and having the report gated. And then the next year it moved to the content budget. And I gave a range there of anywhere from like 25,000 to 40,000 per report was what it cost us to work with an external firm. And they did everything from the, building the audience, doing a quantitative research study, some qualitative interviews, and if you want, even also the report generation, which we wanted to create the report ourselves in-house, but we used them for the research piece.
Thanks, Allie. That's really helpful. And we actually, again, because we sort of have that muscle and we have the audience built in, some of those items we don't need to include. But yes, I think that's really helpful. I appreciate the insight into how you plan for that.
Andy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So in this report specifically, there was a pretty large gap in respondents by gender. So there was a lot more females that responded to the survey than males. It was good to see the pay gap was smaller than I've seen in previous years. Do you think that that pay gap number would have been different if there would have been a more even split between the males and females who responded?
That's a great question, and I don't know. And I thought about that gap this year too, like why is it smaller? I think it's not so drastically smaller this year that we can say this is an encouraging trend, both for the reason that you mentioned that, most of our respondents, it's like 2 to 1 male to female, right? In our answers. But I think if you look around the marketing industry, there are a lot of women in this industry, which is why it's a little disappointing that that gap still exists. And I don't want to make too much of the difference this year compared to last year because of just normal fluctuations. And, maybe we had more women in an urban area versus women in a rural area. And if you download the report, you'll see there's a dramatic difference, just as there is a dramatic difference in cost of living between how much people earn in, outside of the big cities and how much they earn in the cities. So I wouldn't take that as either a positive or a negative sign about the gender gap. I think what we can say is that sorry, I heard some cross chatter there. Yeah. So I don't know, Andy. I think that's a really good question. I'm happy to follow up with our research director and see if she feels like that might have made a difference. I think we'd need to, do some comparisons against what we see more at like marketing salaries in other research that's out there. Because again, there's not that much research about content specific roles. So yeah, let me talk with our research director and see what she thinks about that question too.
Yeah, I'd also be curious, regardless of gender, if the work from home policies are having an effect on pay, because I think I saw it sprinkled in there, but it seems like a lot of companies are saying, well, you can work from home now, so we're going to, decrease the pay raises and things like that because you're getting this other benefit. So I'd be curious if that's having an effect.
I think that's a really good question for us to add to the survey. And I think, because one of the things, and I know Dennis is going to ask me about this later, but one of the things I found so interesting in the research is how many people, and a lot of them were women, said that if they were required to go back to the office 5 days a week, they'd leave their jobs. And I think that's a really dramatic finding. And I really want to kind of dig into that a little bit more because it speaks to the nature of work and the nature of the marketing career. I know, having worked in content and marketing for many, many years, that work from home and remote work is not a pandemic generated thing, right? Like many of us were working remotely or working from home for a long time before the pandemic hit. So that's why it's always fascinating to me that companies are suddenly saying, oh, wait, we need everybody to come back in. I also suspect that that is not always related to the nature of work, and it may be involved with things like pay, like hidden reduction in force kind of motives, etc. So I think there's definitely more research we can do around that. I think that's a great question to ask in the survey next year, Andy, whether work from home is having an impact on people's salaries.
And Kim, we have a question from Allie in the chat. I know you touched briefly on how you had the committee get together for this particular career outlook report, but Allie's asking for ideas on how to choose the topic. She says, I found that sometimes we procure the budget to do a research report, but we find ourselves with a research report budget in search of a topic. Any suggestions?
Yeah, well, I think, exactly what we did is really look around the industry at your industry, whichever industry you're focusing on, and see what research is being done. And then also think about what kinds of questions are out there about whatever your topic is that aren't being answered. And is that something that your organization can find the right people to question about it? Is it something that maybe you have first party data about that you can look at your own materials and see, oh, are there interesting stories in how people interact with us? But I think really look for the gaps, right? Just like you would for planning your own content that's maybe not research driven. What have you wondered about? How many people are doing this? What kinds of questions do you hear from people in your industry about, what it's like to work in that industry, or how people approach problem XYZ? I think really, brainstorming, looking for the gaps, all the things that you would do for any kind of content, you would also do for research, and then look and see, does anybody else have research out about this? And is it good research? So, if maybe some research reports exist, but they're flawed or the sample size isn't right, I think those are places to look. But then you also want to make sure that it ties into your story in a way.
Yep, so an example based off of Kim's suggestion, a great example is Andy Crestodina and Orbit Media.
Yeah.
Some of you might know about his, I think it's the 12th annual B2B blogger survey. And 12 years ago, he said, what was a key question that our industry that did not have an answer? It's like he would check Google and nobody had the source. So the first question he tried to answer was, how long does it take the typical B2B blogger to publish a single blog post? And like that, Google did not have the answer. So he started the survey 12 years ago, and it's got a lot more questions now. And it's now just the authoritative research on blogging. And I think Andy has some case studies about the impact that that one piece of research has impact to orbit on that original research. Let's see. Other questions? I have
Typed
some prepared.
something in the chat, a message in the chat.
Okay. We see that, Patrick. There are marketers here, but we're not talking about solicitation just at the moment. We're talking about research. So you can follow up later. So Kim, I have a question. The report describes quote unquote profound changes happening within marketing. And I did notice Robert Rose and his rose-colored glasses column last Friday. I think he weighed in on this particular angle of the report and the whole, I guess, quandary or the situation marketers face today as far as career growth. So what advice do you have? Let's talk about entry-level marketers or a junior marketer who's a non-manager but wants to grow into a manager. What suggestion would you have for marketers at the early stage of their careers?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I bet a lot of people on this call will be able to jump in with additional additional suggestions. At the same time, it's a really tricky question because obviously no one has a crystal ball, and what the outlook looks like today is very different from 5 years ago, right? Everybody's an individual, so their idea of what makes a great career is very different. I definitely want to let people know, and many of you on this call know this because I think you've possibly been mentors, but if you're early in your career and you're looking for a mentor or a guide or a way to advance, the Content Marketing Institute does have a mentorship program where we try to match people earlier in their career with people with more experienced content marketers who have a similar kind of background. That program, I can send the link over, but it's available in the resources section of our website. And it starts, I believe applications open in February. And that's just a great way to get matched with a mentor for the year, or maybe it's 6 months. But my husband actually is also a content marketer, and he's been a mentor, and he's found it very rewarding, and I hope his mentees have found it similarly rewarding. So that's a great program. But let me tell you a little bit about what the report recommends, and then I'm going to give you my own take, and then I'd love to hear what other people's suggestions are as well. Obviously, the report advises, and this may be obvious, but I think it's important to all of us, and you can kind of see how this answer breaks down across generations in the slide that Dennis is sharing. Thank you, Dennis. Focus on your skills, right? People are focusing on building certain kinds of skills. And I think the ones listed here are certainly important ones. Number one, across all the generations, I believe, is learning new platforms. Yes, generative AI falls into that. Learning new technology and platforms. Leadership skills also showed up quite a lot. And I think depending on where your career is going, that's an important thing to study and attempt to learn about. Data and analytics skills, that one needs no explanation. SEO is there. If you see writing kind of falls down to the middle of that, which I'm not sure I agree with. I think any role that you're in, being able to write clearly is important, but so not to say that the rest of these things are not important, but let's not give up on writing, people. And second to that, another recommendation of the report is to get comfortable with AI tools. I don't think anybody has a choice about this. Learn everything you can about the best ways to use AI to make your work more efficient and enhance the things that you already want to be good at and to spend your work life doing. This ties into my own personal advice for any career, I think, is to practice curiosity. And I say practice curiosity because, yes, absolutely, we're all born with curiosity, as anybody who has ever met a toddler knows. but it's also, I think, a skill that can be sharpened and applied in many ways and in many situations. I think for a career, to be curious about what opportunities are out there, be curious about technology for sure. Be curious about the people who the work you're doing affects. If you're a marketer, be curious about the people you're marketing to. Be curious about your competition. Be curious about the industry that you're working in. And I don't just mean look up the facts and figures and memorize things. I mean, really dig into the why behind what you're doing. Why does any of this matter? How do we know what would help someone? And really, curiosity comes down to being willing to ask questions. Um, Doing research is a form of asking questions, but talking to people is really, really important. We ran an article last week, maybe, about 5 things content marketers sometimes hang back from doing, even though they know they should. And talking directly to an audience, to people in your audience, I think is one of those things that people can sometimes feel uncomfortable about, but it's so important to do. And I think this sort of idea of applying your curiosity, asking the why, digging in to find the reason is so important to every aspect of any career. And that's my advice. But I would love to hear from Dennis, from everybody in the audience. How would you guide a person who's interested in getting into marketing and or content marketing?
Just to build off the curiosity, I think hand in hand with curiosity is experimentation learning. Like the top row was working with new technologies. So I remember back when social media was considered new and there was like the latest social media service came out, I would always want to just establish an account and see what it's about. And that made me developed an interest in, because I was able to understand, let's say it was Instagram when Instagram was new. I established hands-on experience with Instagram from a personal point of view, or maybe Twitter is a better example because am not too advanced with Instagram, but I was able to use the service personally such that I could then go to my employer or to clients and say, I can manage your social because I've been using it for years and I've learned how to make an impact with personal posts, but now I can take that learning and translate that to a brand. Anyone else?
I know, I was really encouraging my team, particularly in my last role, to just not pigeonhole themselves into too specific of a skill set, and to make sure that they're diversifying their skills. I had some team members who came over from an acquisition who were hired really solely to be SEO content writers. And there was a time and a place when that made a lot of sense. But with all of the changes that have happened with SEO and Google, there's at least for our team, we were really shifting away from writing for SEO and needing to have skills in posting in communities and distribution strategies and social media. And so I think it's a lot to learn and a lot of things to juggle, but the more everybody can diversify those skills, the better people are going to be set up for wherever their career path might take them.
Two things. I'll second Kim's recommendation of the CMI mentorship program. I was a mentee. I've been a mentor for 2 years, and it's been a great program. And I put the link in the chat so you can get to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But also, this is one of the things that I recommend to my mentees when I talk to them is build your development, your skills development, and your training and learning into your professional goals and talk about it with your mentor. They're more or with your manager, they're more likely to pay for training or pay for you to go to sessions if it's planned and you have a clear path of how these skills that you want to acquire, fit into that path. Also, if your company offers access to LinkedIn Learning or you have LinkedIn Premium, which gives you access to LinkedIn Learning, that's great. Coursera has a lot of free stuff out there. So there's a lot of free opportunities too, that you can take advantage of, depending on what skills you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I think, I started out this answer saying that nobody has a crystal ball. And so I think, just availing yourself of every opportunity that you think could pay off for you in terms of career skills, and really just exploring what's available, kind of keeping yourself broadly aware and participating in many, many things that may, in the later in your life, lead you in a specific career direction. Hi, Rich. I see your hand up.
Yeah, at the risk of being self-serving for the meetup, I will say all of this points to the reason I co-organized this community with Dennis. So if I think back to when I first read Christina Halverson's content strategy for the web many, 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 many years ago, in the appendix, like next steps, action items, one of the CTAs was find a meetup near you or create one, which is what we've done. Because as a supportive community for knowledge sharing and networking, it speaks to all these skills you might want to learn. Everything on this slide we have covered in this meetup. Dennis has hosted, I think, closing in on 130 Zooms at noon since pandemic. We're looking at nearly 4,000 members now with global members. But so I would also one, word of mouth. I'm always talking about the meetup. Yesterday I interviewed a colleague here has a headcount open, and so I interviewed one of his candidates, and I closed by we connected on LinkedIn, and I recommend she join the meetup. So I think there's something to be said there. We are Joe Polizzi's favorite meetup still, just that's anyway. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Rich. Donovan, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, something that I've really struggled with in terms of the rate of technological evolution, and how fast our world is changing and constantly shifting and not knowing, what technologies to invest time in because they go extinct. Like literally, that's happened to me many times. I'd encourage you to consider the thing that won't change, and that's pretty much human psychology. Understanding humans, how they think, especially empathic thinking, like a copywriter, right? So that you can, I don't know, I think that that is always going to be a skill that you can depend on, that'll always serve you well. Personally, tossing it out there.
Yeah, I think in marketing, that's especially important, understanding people's motivations, right? I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I was at a wedding when I first got started in marketing. So I actually transitioned into marketing from IT. So I was kind of just new to marketing, and I was at a wedding, and I met a woman who she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm in marketing." And she replied, "Oh, so you understand the human condition and human psychology." And I thought to myself, I do. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense looking back on that. Like
That's
she knew
great.
what marketing is about. And
Yeah.
I didn't know as much because I was still getting into it.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
funny. The first marketer I ever met in my career had a psychology degree. She didn't have a business degree or a marketing degree. She had a psychology degree.
All right, let's move on. So Kim, my next question is, let me see, there's somebody with unmuted. My next question is about freelancing. So this surprised me in the research, which said 22% of full-time content marketers, I believe, do freelance on the side. I am a freelancer, so I love it. I'm more of 100%. But my question is, in a scenario where you're a full-time employee, but you do some freelancing on the side, what suggestions do you have on guardrails so that your work as a freelancer doesn't interfere, it hopefully doesn't compete with the initiatives of your full-time employee?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And the number one thing that I would say is that if you need your day job to pay your bills, and most of the people who said that they freelance on top of their jobs are earning about $8,000 a year from their freelance efforts. So I'd say most people still need their day jobs to pay their bills. Then don't do anything that will jeopardize your day job. That is your bread and butter. It feels very obvious, but here are some things you can do to make sure that you're staying on the right side of this. Explore your employee handbook to make sure you understand any company policies around freelancing or moonlighting or whatever you want to call it. It also could make sense to clarify things with your manager if the policy isn't clear. But again, the idea is you want to preserve your regular income until you're ready, if you ever are, to move out and become a full-time freelancer. Be very disciplined about keeping things separate. Don't use your corporate computer or your corporate phone to solicit work or to work on freelance projects. Simply assume that your employer is watching everything that you do, and it's just not good practice to use company resources for things that are not company work. And it's not worth the blowback. Just, it might be more convenient, but have separate resources that you can apply to your freelance work. Assume you have an NDA with your existing employer and with every client you work with, whether you've signed anything formal or not. I mean, think about it. You wouldn't want to work with somebody who freely spills details of their other clients' work and strategy, et cetera, with you, because then you'd always be wondering, oh, are they sharing details of what they're doing with me? And make sure you do your work for your day job first. You want to get that out of the way. I realize that especially with remote work and work from home, you know, it's not necessarily about, am I at my desk from 9 to 5, but it's certainly about, are you fulfilling the expectations and exceeding, at least fulfilling the expectations of your daily role. So I would certainly say those are the guardrails that you would want to put in place. But I suspect that we have people listening today who have some experience here and would want to share their take on how they've made it work as well.
Heather,
And
you
I
have
see
your hand
Heather
raised?
with a hand up.
Yep, looks like Heather has withdrawn the hand.
And I was on mute. Sorry about that.
There you are.
Just wanted to echo that I've been 100% self-employed for most of the past 25 years, but there have been phases where I've worked full-time for a company and then did my own stuff on the side. And I did all of those things that you just mentioned. In one case, I had one computer and one space for the full-time job. And then I would do my own stuff in a separate room on a separate computer in the other space. I talked with them up front about the possibility of doing things on the side when I was fairly confident that I was going to have the role, and they were fine with it. But I also, my work on the side, I made sure that it was dramatically different than what I was doing in the full-time job. For example, the full-time job was focused on drug development. And so when I would take on clients on my own, I would make sure it was not in drug development. So there wouldn't be any potential or even, the appearance of any kind of conflict.
I think that's really good advice. And I think often those kinds of things are covered in the kind of company policies about freelancing. Freelancing for a competitor is probably a no-no. Freelancing in a different field might be a different story. And I think in the research, it does show that some of the freelancing people are doing are on their passion projects, which may or may not be something that ties into their daily bread and butter role. It might be, but it might not be. But it's a smart way to do it. Freelance in something that is not too closely tied to what your day job is.
Another tactic you can use is, I know things have become fluid with remote work, and our work lives and our personal lives, especially if we're working from home, they all blend together. But to give the full faith to your full-time role, You might want to set up time boundaries. So you might say, I'm dedicated to my full-time job 9 to 5. I'm not going to touch any freelance work in that window. Then I only do my freelance work after I eat dinner. So like 6 to 9 p.m. or what have you. But you still have to honor any full-time work that comes in that requires you to be off hours. But you could just limit your freelance work to a certain window that you know is set aside during the day for that.
I think that's great advice too, definitely.
Any other comments on this topic? Otherwise, we can go to another topic.
I'll just say that freelancing is a great opportunity to explore other industries and maybe even other jobs. You know, if you're a content producer and you want to learn more about SEO research, you might put in some extra time to do learnings in your freelance job, but you can really broaden your experience by doing that.
Good advice, Todd. Let's see, we're going to go on to another topic that this meetup is very interested in. So the research does ask marketers about their views on AI, how they're using it, whether they fear for their jobs. So my question to Kim from the CMI team, maybe the editorial team, to what extent is the CMI team using AI, and whatever details you can share, please share.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what we learned from the research, in case you all haven't had a chance to look at it. So first, let me show you this list. Thank you, Dennis, for putting it up. It's a ranked list based on first the people who say they use generative AI, and then we ask them to select which items are high value to them. So in terms of the value people are getting from their uses of generative AI today, proofreading is at the top of the list, summarizing content, outlining assignments, brainstorming new topics, writing article drafts, analyzing data performance, writing email copy, repurposing content, creating buyer personas, and optimizing content. Those are the top 10. We do some of these things. CMI, like many organizations, is still experimenting with how we want to apply generative AI. And keep in mind that CMI is owned by a large multinational company called Informa. And Informa actually has a policy about how we can and can't use publicly available generative AI tools. Now, so some constraints come with being part of a big corporation. We do have an internal custom tool that we can use. So a lot of our experimentation comes from there. Right now on the editorial team, we do use AI that's built into a lot of tools, and we use Informa's kind of homegrown tool. Some of the ways that we use it regularly, AI produces transcripts of our events when we need them, live events, webinars, etc. We often then give these to a human writer, and Dennis is sometimes one of those writers, who will, review the transcript, watch the session, and turn it into an actual article. I personally have experimented with using AI to do that, and I just have not found the quality to be where I would want it to be, even, though obviously the raw materials are there from the presentation. But the amount of work I think that it takes to improve what the AI did just isn't worth it. Not to me anyway. I have not found that to be a useful use of time so far. We do use AI to caption our videos. That's an important accessibility thing to do. And we use AI to generate an audio version of every post, which I think is both great for accessibility and, for engagement for people who may not want to sit and read, for an hour, probably not an hour, but they'll listen to the article and then come back and look at the text version when they want to reference it again. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if any of you have listened to our AI articles. Some of them used cloned voices with the permission of the person whose voice was cloned, and we're always very careful to disclose that. So Robert Rose, if you like his rose-colored glasses column, you can now listen to that, and it sounds pretty close to Robert's voice. it's kind of eerie to me. You can tell that it's not Robert, and I think that's I would want to disclose it anyway, but I think it's important at the beginning to say, this is a cloned voice because we're not trying to trick anybody. But that is kind of one of the sort of main ways that's really built into our daily process now. We do sometimes use Grammarly to help with proofreading, but we also have human editors and a human proofreader. I just think that sometimes when someone's looked at a piece many, many times, there are just a few things that are easy to slip through, and Grammarly can help with that. I think I said this already, but we don't use AI for any article writing. Different people on staff are experimenting with it for what I call bits and bobs, right? The meta descriptions, the kind of content around content. I haven't found it to be really good at that yet. But sometimes I do use it. It helps me get over what I call blank page syndrome, where you just kind of don't have that in, or you're tired or whatever. And I've found it to be useful in that way. If any of you do get CMI's daily alert, you know that I write a little note. I think I mentioned it to introduce each article every day. And sometimes I sit down to write it and I'm just at a blank. So I've tried with Informa's tool to kind of feed it some examples of my writing and see if I can get something out of it. But most of the time, it's not super helpful. It is helpful in getting over the blank page. I wouldn't call it brainstorming because I wouldn't say it gives me new ideas, but it does sort of get me over the, where do I start with this? But every now and then I find myself arguing with it over what is actually my tone of voice and what isn't. And then I know, okay, I'm procrastinating at this point, and I just knuckle down and write the thing myself. Yeah, so those are kind of the key ways. I think, like many people, we're experimenting with different things, but I'm curious about how you're all using it. I know, Dennis, you have some interesting uses for it. And I bet a lot of the people listening have some interesting things that they're doing.
Happy to comment. I first wanted to share a chat message from Andy. She mentions, she put a link in for Notebook LM, which is from Google. I think it's a Google Gen AI tool that can take content like a document and turn it into a podcast. I think Robert might have covered this recently.
He did, I think, just on Friday. So if you go to our website and look at Friday's post, yeah, I'll tell you the name of it. But sorry, Dennis, keep talking while I look.
And the Joe Polizzi has a personal newsletter, and I think today's issue, he, among other things, he gave a link to his own experiment with Notebook LM. I think he took, I forgot what it was, maybe something, he had a short PDF that's his content. And I think he was able to train Notebook LM on his voice. Then he uploaded it, and in his newsletter, he dropped a link to the audio file. And it takes the content of the document, and it's Joe speaking in an AI voice, and then it inserts as if he was speaking to someone else. So you get the, yeah, interesting. So it's like, it's pretty amazing. I can take just basic content and possibly turn it into podcast episodes.
Yeah, I'm curious what people think about that. Yeah, I'm curious.
I have dug into it because I'm a professor. I teach in an MBA marketing class, and I introduced it to my students because a lot of them like podcasts. They let you know they're driving, they're listening in their car. And so, I encourage them to use because we were talking about segmentation one week, and I uploaded my slides from that, and it created a podcast. And it's just I'm a big fan of, like, everybody learns different ways. And so if you're an auditory learner, that could be something that could help you.
My own personal reaction to this is, like, specifically about Joe. I love Joe's work and I love following Joe. I don't want to listen to AI Joe. I want to hear the real Joe. So I could see how people that don't know Joe, but they want little snippets of nuggets of wisdom, they could get value from AI Joe, because it's his content, but just with an AI voice. But I don't want to hear AI speaking as if it was Joe. I want to hear the real Joe.
Yeah, how else are people using AI? I'd love to hear from all of you what you're doing with generative AI right now.
In terms
Well,
of generative, not specifically, because it still just have issues of accuracy and just it's too much generic voice, and I think too much of not getting the content even close to right. Certainly, I wrote in the chat, certainly using things like to improve the accuracy of voice transcription and so forth to make sure that it simplifies that process tremendously. But it's not really generating as much as sort of analyzing what's already there.
Sometimes when I'm looking for thought starters or outlines of big projects or things like that, I will plug the same prompt into multiple different tools and kind of pick and choose the best pieces of, and then add in my own and, kind of create things that way.
So Andy, do you find you do a lot of, when I put something in like that, I do a lot of back and forth. I say, yeah, this is good. What do you think about this? Or I don't agree with that. And it is very interactive, and I get to a better place with what I get back. Have you done that on different platforms? You just put in one prompt and run with the one that's best?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on what the project is that I'm working on or what I'm asking it to do and how complex or specific I need it to be. So I have done that, and yeah, and obviously you're going to get a lot of the same stuff, right? Depending on the platform. So there are slight differences in the platforms and what they output. But a lot of times it's a lot of the same stuff.
I had an interesting thing with the client recently. She's like, agencies are all, they're switching to ChatGPT for doing their searching, and we're not showing up in ChatGPT. And in one brand, another brand they had, I went and did some testing with their different brands. One brand, they were like the number one in ChatGPT, but they were nowhere in the map on Google search. So I did a little more digging around, and I found out, well, yeah, that brand was nowhere to be found in Google. I mean, I could have clicked down enough pages, but it was like it was on top in Bing. So if you want to show up in ChatGPT, if you want your content and your brand to show up, just go to Bing and see how you're doing in Bing and try to improve that. It was really interesting. And Google, I put the same thing into Google's in generative AI, and that brand didn't show up. Just like it didn't show up in Google search, it didn't appear really anywhere in Google's AI. It was really interesting.
Have you seen people talking about AI engine optimization? I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Todd, right? Like how do we optimize to be found by, generative AI search versus Google search, Bing search? Maybe it's just the same. Yeah. Optimize for one of the search engines, and their AI will find you. But yeah, I think that's a bit of a topic I see being kicked around.
Yeah, I've seen it kicked around. I haven't seen anything that was useful yet.
It's so right. Exactly,
it's so early, and it'll change, right? Whatever's useful. If you find a way to crack that nut today, 2 years from now, it'll move on to something completely different. But for now, I just look at Bing and look at Google and see, are you ranking in one and not the other? You'll probably, it'll probably see the same kind of results in their generative AI.
Yeah.
I forgot where I heard this, but one approach is, and I think there are some experts starting to emerge about AI optimization, or whatever it's called, AI engine optimization. But there's a popular AI search engine called Perplexity. And when you enter a search, it cites the sources. So all the links that it's referring to are below. So you can, like, if you're researching your company's brand, you can put that in there, or like the general industry that your company operates in. And obviously, maybe you don't show up, but you can see the sources that Perplexity cites and try to have a earned media relationship to try to get covered by the sources that Perplexity is quoting. So even if it's not that specific article, like going forward, if you know that Perplexity is citing some media site, if you are able to get the attention of that site to cover you, then that might get you into Perplexity down the road. And with that, I think we're out of time. We're actually 1 minute over. So Kim, thanks so much for joining us. We will see you in San Diego.
Thanks. That
those
was
of you-
really fun. I really appreciate everybody's input and questions. So that was great. And I hope to see you in San Diego.
If you missed the beginning, if you're inclined to travel to San Diego for Content Marketing World, Kim has a discount code. It's KimCMI. It's $200 off. You can also find me if you want details on how to apply your discount for Content Marketing World. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Dennis.